I took my first solo trip in 2018 to Mexico. I went to Cancun, Valladolid, and Tulum and had the time of my life. And who knew that a few years later I'd still be an advocate for solo travel. Since then, I've gone to Panama, I've gone to Guatemala, and I've even gone on train rides. So the beauty of solo travel is real, but also the anxiety is real too. And as a Black woman, people are always telling me what I can't do, what I should be doing. And I'm here to tell you, it is okay if you're anxious. It is okay if you are a bit worried about what it's like as a Black woman in other countries. But I do have some tips to help you overcome that anxiety as a Black woman traveler. My first tip for any solo traveler is to send your itinerary to a loved one, whether that's your parents, your best friend, your partner, whoever in your life you trust. Send your itinerary to that person. While most people in my experience have been very nice and genuine, and no one's ever tried to harm me as a solo traveler, I do find that I have a sense of security when someone else knows where I'm staying, how long I'm staying there, just in case something happens and they need to know where I'm at. Whether it's a Google Doc or a Padlet or a Notion page, whatever you use to plan your trips, I highly recommend sending that itinerary to someone you trust. Or if you have an iPhone, I also recommend that you share your location with someone too. Anything can happen anywhere, and so you don't want to be caught up. So send that itinerary to someone back home as you're traveling solo. My next tip is to journal and use the 3-3-3 rule. So journaling in general is my personal favorite way to overcome solo travel anxiety. When I can get my emotions out on paper, when I can just express myself very rawly, I love it. And so that's why I recommend doing journaling. And it doesn't have to be pages long every day of your solo trip. You may want to jot down some notes every now and again, or whenever you feel moved to write, you should do so. It's also great to look back on that travel journal later to have all those different things you were feeling, what you were seeing, and kind of reliving those moments even when you're not actively solo traveling. However, to ground yourself when you are overwhelmed, you can also use the 3-3-3 rule for your journal. This is specifically for people who get anxiety. What you do is identify 3 things you can see, hear, and touch. Your sights and senses are recognizing what's going on around you, so you're more in tune with that than those anxious feelings you may be having. The 3-3-3 rule helps you prevent those negative thoughts that may be creeping in, all those things people told you before you left about how dangerous it was. The 3-3-3 rule helps you focus on present moment and what you're actively feeling and seeing and experiencing to prevent those thoughts from happening. The next tip is for my Black women who may be a bit more anxious about even writing their thoughts down. You can always record voice notes and save them for later. This is a great way to talk out what you're feeling since you don't have somebody else next to you to process. Those voice notes allow you to let it all out with no judgment, and they're only for you to listen to. You can share your solo travel fears, those highs, those lows, those exciting things that happen when you're traveling as a Black woman solo. And similar to a written diary, it becomes an auditory diary for you when you go home. Another great tip is to utilize aromatherapy. I know we all love a good smell, but we also know that good smells can definitely make us feel more relaxed, can definitely soothe us, and that is what aromatherapy does. Essential oils such as lavender, sandalwood, peppermint, rosemary are great oils to have with you in travel size, of course, to take on your trip. So when you are feeling anxious or nervous or kind of uncertain in what you're doing, you can rub it on your temples or even get a little TSA approved spray bottle and spray the lavender oil mixed with some water on your pillow at night or on your light bulb in your hostel, hotel, or Airbnb. And if you're someone who is often on the road, like a remote worker, kind of like me as a remote social worker, I also recommend getting a lavender jelly air freshener so you can put that in your hotel, so no matter where you go, you always have a familiar smell. Sometimes we need to work up to those bigger trips. So if you're a Black woman who wants to solo travel but doesn't want to go abroad quite yet and is a bit anxious about booking a ticket all the way across the world, know that you do not have to. I recommend starting small, doing a little local trip for a weekend or a national trip. If you are in the US, there are tons of cities you can go to for the weekend. If you are worried about being bored or on your first kind of small solo trip, I also recommend going for a festival. There are a lot of Black festivals around that you can go to and meet other Black folks. The more comfortable you are with yourself and being alone, but also balancing being around people who you may not know, the better for your future solo trip. All of these smaller trips are practice for that really big epic solo trip you want to go on. For those Black women who are really into meditation or deep breathing, those are really good stress management techniques to use in high intense, high stress level situations where you feel yourself getting very emotional. I know on my first solo trip, I almost hyperventilated in the airport because I was just so nervous. It was the first time I was going on a solo trip. I didn't know anybody in Mexico. I didn't know who I would meet. I had some things planned, but not everything. And I just got really anxious because for the first time I was traveling without knowing anyone where I was going. But looking back on it, I wanted to feel those emotions, and I used meditation and deep breathing because I was sitting in Chicago O'Hare Airport waiting for my flight to leave. So while meditation and deep breathing may not be things you do in your daily life, I recommend putting them into your solo travel toolbox so you know how to use them just in case. If you are a Black woman who wants to travel solo, before you go, I recommending researching the destination as much as you can, looking at other Black travel bloggers and influencers who have talked about their experiences in various countries. Those are really good points of reference to have. However, I will say don't get too caught up in someone else's travel experience, even if they're a Black woman. We are all different and you never know what's gonna happen. And again, anything can happen anywhere. So while it's good to know, don't rely 100% on what you may be reading online. I would also say before you go to surround yourself with people who are supportive of your decision to travel solo. A lot of the times the people around us dictates what we think is right or wrong, and if you really want to go on a solo trip and you feel like you are prepared to go, having someone in your ear constantly telling you it's too dangerous, you shouldn't be doing that, and really hinder and make it seem like actually it's something you don't want to do. I know especially for a lot of Black Americans, we are fearful of racism in the US and abroad, which is a very real fear to have, and unfortunately anti-Blackness is global, so it can happen anywhere. However, do not let that deter you from solo traveling. I find that my anxiety levels are actually a lot lower when I'm traveling abroad because I don't have the history and the weight that we often carry every day in the US. However, with that, I also avoid making assumptions as a Black woman who often travels solo. Many times we are given direct and indirect messages about certain cities and countries and therefore make assumptions about places we've never been to ourselves. And that can add to your anxiety, getting yourself worked up, and also add to overgeneralizations about people in other places. There are a lot of things we're told that are not normal for us, however, they may be normal for other people. And so we don't want to be ethnocentric or make it seem like where we come is superior, because that can also add to our anxiety of the unknown. So try to avoid that. Do your research, but don't overdo it to the point where you think you know everything about a country, because chances are you're going to be shocked anyway. For Black women who love music, I also recommend making 2 playlists. Nothing will gas you up more than your favorite song, so I recommend making a hot girl playlist. On this playlist, put those songs that make you feel invincible, like you can do anything. For me, that's some Toni Braxton, Megan Thee Stallion, some Beyonce, whoever gets you going, put that on your hot girl playlist. I promise you, when you are feeling nervous or you need a pick-me-up on your solo trip, this is the playlist you'll be going to. Think of those songs that make you want to dance, make you want to feel more alive, and all those songs that increase your confidence. Those are the ones you want to put on your hot girl playlist, so when you need that boost of energy, if that anxiousness is becoming a bit too much for you. On the flip side, I recommend creating a calming playlist. Sometimes your anxiety may not require the hype music of your hot girl playlist, so I recommend having both on your calming playlist, putting that lo-fi music, maybe that slow R&B kind of vibe, smooth jazz, that kind of music should definitely go on your calming playlist. So perhaps when you're journaling, doing the 333 method, you're able to kind of play this in the background and have your lavender spritz going all around you so that you're able to relax your nerves and reduce that very high, intense emotional reaction you're having as you're solo traveling. Having both a hot girl playlist and a calming playlist is a really great way to be prepared for whatever you may be feeling as you're traveling solo. And finally, I recommend 3 mindset shifts for when you are traveling solo as a Black woman. The first one that I myself have to remember all the time is that everyone is not out to get me. I know people watch Taken and think everything's gonna be very dramatic when you go abroad and you may be kidnapped, but people are just living their lives. They do not care about tourists. They wish some of us be a little bit more respectful, but other than that, they're really not interested in taking anything from the average tourist. Anything can happen anywhere. I say it all the time. However, when you start traveling solo enough, when you start going out to eat solo enough, you realize that no one is actually bothering you. No one's thinking about you. No one's paying attention to you. Most people are going about their lives and not even thinking that you exist. So don't feel the need to look over your shoulder every 5 minutes. The second mindset shift I recommend having as a Black woman who may be a bit anxious is that you are doing something incredible. Black women are always taught that we have to take care of other people or put other folks first in our communities. And a solo trip is one of the most liberating things that you can do for yourself. You are out there traveling on your own, doing this really incredible thing, and tapping into that and not focusing on the negative or all the bad things that can happen can really help you shift your thinking from being a bit anxious to being more accomplished and proud of yourself because you are doing something that not many people have the chance to do. And all of that leads to my third mindset shift, and is that you have the skills to solo travel and do this. Sometimes we get into our head, even in our daily lives, that we don't have the skills to handle conflict or do a job. And all of that also applies to solo traveling. Navigating a place solo, planning an itinerary from start to finish, and being bold enough to even book a trip are all skills you already possess because you're already on your solo trip. So thinking about how far you've come to that moment where you may be a bit anxious on that solo trip can really help shape that, hey, I know what I'm doing, I got this, and there is no reason to be anxious. So don't be afraid to relinquish that control. Yes, it may be a bit scary, but lean into the fear and focus on, hey, I'm here, I'm doing it, and what can I do next? Those are all the tips that I use as a Black woman solo traveler. I love traveling solo. Y'all know I do it on trains, planes, doing food tours, and everything in between, and it brings me so much joy. So I hope that on your solo trip, you're able to kind of let that anxiety go. Don't let it get to you. Use a bunch of these skills and techniques in order to make your solo trip the best one it can be. Thank you so much for watching. As always, don't forget to subscribe, like, leave a comment or tip for another Black woman who may be watching this video on what she needs to be thinking about to reduce her own anxiety. And I will see you all in my next video. Bye everyone, stay curious.